There's a lot in life that feels like it should be guaranteed but isn't, like getting the same number of socks from the dryer that you put in, a pair of jeans still fitting, weather forecast, or an empty nest staying empty. AT&T is introducing a new guarantee you can count on, the AT&T Guarantee, offering connectivity that you can depend on, deals you want, and service you deserve, or they'll make it right. Visit att.com/guarantee to learn more. AT&T, connecting changes everything. Terms and conditions apply. Visit att.com/guarantee for details.
Have you ever met someone who truly embodies what it means to be a people person? Someone who is always ready to assist others. This describes a vibrant and outgoing college student from Nanuet, New York, with a compassionate heart and a strong desire to help those in need. As a nursing student, she is on the path to a successful career. But when an unexpected event occurs, will her friends be able to help the detectives uncover the truth of what happened? What happens when love becomes fatal? This is the Fatal Attraction Podcast with Beyond the Grave.
September 15th, 1999. It's a quiet Wednesday evening in Nanuet, New York, a suburban community just 25 miles north of New York City.
Nanuet is what they call in New York a hamlet. It doesn't have a city government of its own.
It falls within the town of Clarkstown.
It's low crime, a good school system, affordable houses, manicured lawns.
Around 9:40 p.m., 23-year-old Angie Despinas has just arrived at the home she shares with her mother and her older sister, Michelle.
Angie had just finished her college courses for the evening.
But something about the house immediately strikes Angie as odd.
We have a sensor light that's on the outside of my mom's home, and the light did not turn on. That's kind of strange because Michelle's car is here, and whoever gets home first will put the switch up.
Inside the house, Angie doesn't see any sign of her sister.
Michelle, are you home?
There was no response, just this eerie silence.
But when Angie turns into the living room, she's met with a nightmare.
I saw that she was on the floor and she was hurt, and I tried to call out to her, but she was unresponsive.
Oh my God!
For Michelle Despinas, helping others was her greatest passion.
She wanted to become a nurse like my mom.
She had a love for people, so no surprise that she would be wanting to go into nursing.
Michelle was just always an outgoing individual. If you looked up people person, you'd see Michelle's picture in the dictionary.
She's very, very friendly, but she was tough. You know, she was into sports a lot. She loved the game, and she was very dedicated.
In her 20s, Michelle's desire to follow in her mother's footsteps came to fruition.
She was attending Rockland Community College in the nursing program there. That was just something that she always wanted to do.
While in college, Michelle kept herself busy.
Michelle volunteered in the maternity ward at the hospital.
She was an assistant basketball coach at Rockland Community College.
The girls that she coached, she had personal relationships with them where they would call her and she would get up and go. It wasn't just an on-the-court thing for her. If you needed that extra help, she was there.
And in the summer of 1994, 22-year-old Michelle met someone on the court that shared her same love of the game, 22-year-old Ken Rogers.
They used to play pickup games on the same basketball court, so they got to know each other that way.
I'm really making it rain out here.
You're not too bad yourself.
I just remember the phone calls. I met this guy, he's really nice looking, he's tall, and they had that commonality in sports, and they kind of just kicked it off.
Before long, basketball pickup games blossomed into something more.
The relationship was a good relationship, you know, going out on the dates and meeting each other's friends and family.
She was smitten with him, and they started talking about advancing their relationship.
But as time went on, Michelle started to wonder if she and Ken were really right for each other.
She wanted to push with her education and her career, and I'm not sure that Ken was trying to do the same thing.
Ken had a job, but he wasn't on the same trajectory as Michelle.
I don't think he was willing to put in the work to match her.
They did eventually start to grow apart and realized it just wasn't going to work out.
After 5 years, Michelle finally ended things with Ken in June of 1999.
She said, I love him, but I can't be with him anymore.
It's never easy breaking up, but you hope that the two of you can eventually move on.
And for Michelle, moving on didn't take long.
Michelle was at a wedding in Connecticut and met a man named Wade Burton.
What brings you to this wedding?
He's a gentleman. He's an easygoing guy. He was fun, and he was genuinely interested in trying to get to know her, and she was excited about that too.
You gonna be able to keep coaching after you graduate?
I'd like to, if I'm not too busy.
Yeah, I understand.
They had a great time getting to know each other and decided to keep in touch.
Wade lived 2 hours away in Connecticut, but the two didn't let that stop them.
They started dating, and Wade made several trips from Connecticut to see her.
She was excited about this new relationship.
She had a fantastic future ahead of her. She was just an all-around good girl.
But less than 3 months after meeting Wade, Michelle's promising future hangs in the balance when her sister finds her unresponsive on the floor of their home.
Once Angie was able to get her composure, she dialed 911 to get help.
Can you all send someone quick, please?
Clarkstown police arrive within minutes.
Ma'am.
I thought that maybe she had fell and maybe hit her head.
But police quickly determine the reality is more gruesome.
Michelle was shot once in the head.
It appeared to be a fatal injury, and police were about to call the coroner.
Then officers make a shocking discovery.
We've got a pulse.
She was still breathing.
She was still alive.
Stay with us on this unfolding journey as we delve deeper into this tragedy and uncover more surprising revelations.
Hey all, I'm Jamie Lynn Sigler, a mom, actor, and advocate. I know how overwhelming it can be trying to decide which treatment is right for you. I've been there. But you should know you're not alone. You can do this. Start with some research, talk to the community, and most importantly, don't be afraid to ask your doctor questions. You might find results that speak for themselves. That's how I landed on Kesimpta. Ask your doctor if Kesimpta, ofatumumab, could be right for you. You can check out the details at kesimpta.com.
You don't wake up dreaming of McDonald's fries. You wake up dreaming of McDonald's hash browns. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
27-year-old college student Michelle Despinas had a bright future ahead of her.
She's going to school to become a nurse, like her mom. She's an assistant basketball coach. She volunteers at a hospital.
And after breaking up with her boyfriend of 5 years, Ken Rogers, Michelle found a new love interest, 29-year-old Wade Burton.
Michelle lived in New York and Wade lived in Connecticut, but still they were trying to make it work.
But now, Michelle is in critical condition with a gunshot wound to the head.
The entry was through the right side of her head, exit through the left.
One of the police officers said to me something about her being shot, and I'm like, well, what are you talking about? No one would look to hurt her in that way.
It's unclear whether she will live or die.
So it was then now following the ambulance all the way to the hospital and just thoughts going through your mind like, what's gonna happen? She's gotta be okay. Things like this only happen in the movies.
While Michelle's life hangs in the balance, Clarkstown detectives arrive and begin looking for answers.
The reaction was like, wow, why her?
What could this have been? Could this have been a robbery, a burglary?
It doesn't take investigators long to find a vital piece of evidence.
The investigators found one single 9mm shell casing. They also noticed a bullet hole on the floor under where Michelle's head had been.
Police were actually able to dig the bullet right out of the flooring.
It's consistent to a semi-automatic handgun.
The evidence paints a chilling picture of what happened to Michelle.
Due to the location, it was determined that Michelle was on the floor at the time she was shot.
The shooter had stood over her and shot her point blank.
Detectives also find signs of a struggle inside the home.
There were some items knocked over or knocked off the tables.
There's blood splatter consistent with a physical fight.
What investigators don't find are any signs of a robbery.
Nothing was taken from the scene. There was nothing stolen.
There was also no sign of forced entry.
Which leads detectives to conclude that Michelle's shooter must have intentionally targeted her.
This was not a random person attacking her. This had to be someone she knew, most likely someone she let in.
But who could that person be?
Hoping a neighbor might know something, police do a canvass from door to door.
And they're in luck.
One neighbor remembered seeing Michelle the day before the shooting.
Michelle was standing outside her house with a man leaning against a white SUV.
The neighbor can't identify the man, but the investigators hope Michelle's loved ones can fill in the blanks.
When something like this happens, the police have to start with the family, ask them what they know.
Michelle's distraught family and friends have gathered at the hospital, awaiting news of her condition.
It was unreal. I was like, this can't be happening. Like, this is my sister.
I could not get my head wrapped around that. This was real.
Despite their pain, Michelle's loved ones agree to speak to the police.
They wanted to cooperate fully with the investigation.
But they don't have any explanation for what happened.
We don't deal with guns. We don't have this lifestyle. How could she have gotten shot?
They didn't know anyone who would want to hurt Michelle.
However, one friend of Michelle's has some information she thinks could aid in the investigation.
Michelle called me earlier and said her last class got canceled.
Michelle had gotten out of class early and was headed home.
They chatted for a few minutes, and that was it.
But Michelle's friend says there was a second call later that night.
She says that she did receive another call from Michelle just before 9:15 p.m.
She sounded really different.
What do you mean?
She sounded scared.
She's practically whispering, "He's outside, he's outside." And before she can say who, the line goes dead.
She tried to call Michelle back several times, but Michelle never answered.
So you don't know who she was talking about?
Well, I can guess.
She says Michelle was having trouble with her ex.
She had a recent breakup with her boyfriend of 5 years.
She said his name was Ken Rogers.
He hadn't taken it very well.
Stay tuned as we navigate through the unpredictable twists and turns of this gripping episode.
At a hospital in Clarkstown, New York, 27-year-old nursing student Michelle Despinas is clinging to life with a gunshot wound to the head. In speaking with her family and friends, investigators have identified a possible suspect, her ex-boyfriend, 27-year-old Ken Rogers.
They had been dating for about 5 years. They had broken up a few months earlier. He was not taking it well.
But before investigators can speak to Ken, doctors deliver some tragic news.
The bullet wound to Michelle's head has left her completely brain dead.
Doctors informed her family members that the damage was so severe she would never recover.
Michelle's family now faces an impossible decision. But her mother thinks she knows what Michelle would want.
There was a conversation that Michelle had with my mom maybe a few days before, and she was like, "Mommy, if something ever happened to me, I wouldn't want to be on life support." I don't know if she felt like something was going to happen to her, but that conversation is what made my mom decide.
Her mother had to make the decision to send her on her way.
Michelle wouldn't want people to see her like a vegetable because she's such an athletic person, such a vibrant person, such an active person.
Once they make that decision to take her off of life support, the case is now considered a homicide.
As the sun comes up over Clarkstown, investigators are now searching for a murderer. And Michelle's ex is the first person on their radar.
Clearly, detectives need to speak to Ken Rogers.
They were able to contact him, and he agreed to come into the station for an interview.
He had heard that the police were looking for him.
He's also heard that Michelle is dead.
People have been calling me about it. It's just hard to believe, you know?
Ken seems like he doesn't have anything to hide. He's willing to be interviewed.
The detectives start by asking Ken about his relationship with Michelle.
He admitted that they had broken up.
Ken openly admits that he had not taken it well.
We had some arguments. I just wish I could take it all back, you know?
He may have said things that he regretted, but Ken says that he would never have done anything to hurt Michelle.
In fact, Ken says he has an alibi for Wednesday night.
He said that his friend had worked at a local video store and he had gone to visit him around 7 p.m.
According to Ken, he was at this video store until 10 o'clock at night.
There's someone out there.
Michelle was on the phone with her friend around 9:15, and Angie found her body by 9:40.
If Ken's alibi checks out, he couldn't have been the person who killed Michelle.
All right, well, we appreciate your time, Ken, and you're free to go.
Next, detectives reach out to Ken's friend.
They confirmed that Ken had been with him from 7 p.m. to after 10 that night.
He has an airtight alibi.
With Ken crossed off their suspect list, investigators are back at square one. However, they know from speaking with Michelle's loved ones that she started dating someone new after her breakup with Ken. 29-year-old Wade Burton.
Even though Wade lived in Connecticut, it would only taken him a few hours to drive to Nanuet.
Investigators run Wade's name through their computer databases and don't find anything suspicious.
He had no prior criminal history. He had no arrests, no convictions.
But when detectives check Wade's DMV records, they find something that catches their attention.
DMV records revealed that Wade actually drives a white SUV.
You got it, thank you.
There were witnesses who saw a man in a white SUV talking to Michelle.
Wade was almost certainly the man a neighbor saw with Michelle the day before she was killed.
When detectives reach out to Wade, he agrees to drive over from Connecticut to speak with them.
Wade appears to be upset over Michelle's passing.
It's just crazy something like this happened.
But when detectives start asking questions, Wade began to get defensive.
He had admitted to visiting Michelle the day before she was attacked.
However, Wade bristles at what detectives are suggesting.
You think I was involved in this?
He said, "I would never, ever hurt Michelle. And I don't like the insinuation that I could possibly do this."
Wade also claims to have an alibi for the night of the crime.
He said that he was home at his house in Connecticut with his mom and his brother.
Wade's family, his mother, his brother, all confirm his alibi that he was at home in Connecticut.
With both of the prime suspects ruled out, the investigation seemed to be hitting a brick wall.
But then Wade says something that will send the investigation hurtling in an entirely new direction.
Have you looked into Jesse Morton?
Who's Jesse Morton?
Stay with us as detectives search each clue, drawing them closer to the truth. Stay tuned for more of the Fatal Attraction podcast.
Hey all, I'm Jamie Lynn Sigler, a mom, actor, and advocate. I know how overwhelming it can be trying to decide which treatment is right for you. I've been there. But you should know you're not alone. You can do this. Start with some research, talk to the community, and most importantly, don't be afraid to ask your doctor questions. You might find results that speak for themselves. That's how I landed on Kesimpta. Ask your doctor if Kesimpta, ofatumumab, could be right for you. You can check out the details at kesimpta.com.
You don't wake up dreaming of McDonald's fries. You wake up dreaming of McDonald's hash browns. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Police investigating the murder of Michelle Despinas have eliminated her ex, Ken Rogers, and her most recent boyfriend, Wade Burton, as suspects in the crime.
The detectives were able to confirm their alibis at the time of the murder.
But now, Wade has given investigators a tantalizing new lead.
He asked them if they looked into a guy named Jesse Morton.
Who's Jesse Morton?
Some guy Michelle dated briefly before me.
Wade tells detectives Michelle had just broken up with Ken Rogers and gone on a much-needed vacation when she met Jesse.
Jesse had met Michelle on a cruise to the Bahamas, a little shipboard romance, perhaps.
According to Wade, when Jesse and Michelle realized they lived near each other, they went on a few dates at home.
But the romance quickly fizzled out, and that's when Michelle met Wade.
Thank you, Wade. And we'll make sure we look into it.
Could Jesse have been upset that more didn't come out of his relationship with Michelle? Investigators contact him right away.
When detectives reach out to Jesse, he agrees to come in for an interview.
We appreciate you coming in, Jesse, to talk to us. And can you tell us how you knew Michelle?
Jesse confirms that he and Michelle met on a cruise in the Bahamas a few months earlier.
We had a good time, and we figured we'd keep things going when we got back.
But just like Wade said, the romance didn't last long.
Michelle was hesitant to dive into another serious relationship so soon after breaking up with Ken, so they kept it pretty casual.
She's just broken up from a 5-year relationship. She tells Jesse, I'm just not ready.
Jesse says he respected Michelle's decision. But did he really accept it? Especially after Michelle began dating Wade.
Have you really moved on?
Jesse admits he had hoped that Michelle would change her mind.
You can't blame the man for hoping for a romance with Michelle.
But he assures detectives he'd never do anything to harm her.
Jesse, where were you Wednesday night?
I was visiting some friends in D.C.
So police check, and sure enough, he does have an alibi for being in D.C. at the time.
But as detectives are wrapping up their interview with Jesse, he says something that will shift the focus of the investigation yet again.
Listen, if I were you, I'd be checking out her ex-boyfriend.
You mean Ken?
Yeah.
He said that Ken had been stalking her since their breakup.
Jesse claims he witnessed the stalking firsthand, a few days after he and Michelle returned from the cruise.
Jesse was dropping Michelle off at home after a night out.
As Michelle walked towards her front door, Ken emerged from the shadows.
Ken confronted her and was clearly upset that she was with another man.
Nah, who is that, huh?
It's okay, Jesse. I got this.
You sure?
Ken, I need you to stop this. We are over.
Ken eventually left. But according to Jesse, it wasn't an isolated incident.
Michelle had said that he'd been stalking her ever since they broke up. just being real creepy and everything.
Sometimes she would leave for work in the morning, and he'd be outside standing there.
Ken was trying to pressure her to get back together with him.
But regardless of what Jesse says, Ken still has an airtight alibi.
Police had already ruled out Ken since his alibi about being at the video store checked out.
However, when one of Michelle's colleagues from the hospital she volunteered at comes forward, it bolsters Jesse's account.
They came forward to indicate that they had seen and heard Michelle and Ken arguing in the months leading up to the murder.
On one occasion, an argument had turned physical.
Michelle!
A witness observed Michelle and Ken having words, and Ken shoved Michelle.
According to Michelle's colleague, the arguments all stemmed from one thing: Ken's relentless efforts to win Michelle back.
The witness was so disturbed by what he had seen that the witness walked up to Michelle and asked if she was okay.
You okay?
Michelle's colleague tells detectives that minutes later, Ken returned, but his demeanor was completely different.
Ken, please just go.
I'm sorry.
He showed back up with a bouquet of flowers, just begging Michelle to take him back.
I'm sorry.
She told Ken that she was not interested in pursuing a relationship, but the harassment continued. That was part of a pattern in the months before the murder.
Ken was intimidating her, stalking her, and harassing her. He was finding out information about who she was dating, where she was going, and was circling her block where she lived.
Ken's history of stalking Michelle has investigators convinced they're on the right track. But it isn't enough to overcome Ken's alibi.
Without more evidence, the investigators seem to be hitting a dead end.
That's when detectives receive a package from the crime lab.
CSI had confiscated a lot of items from the crime scene, including an answering machine that was at the home.
You're gonna wanna hear this.
And when the messages on the answering machine were transcribed, CSI techs noticed an alarming recording.
The recording isn't a voicemail. It's actually a voice recording that can be activated by pressing a button on the answer machine. When they pop them in the tape player, the detectives are left speechless.
Michelle had apparently pushed the memo button. Everything was recorded.
Michelle spoke from the grave.
Stay with us on this unfolding journey as we delve deeper into this tragedy and uncover more surprising revelations.
Hey all, I'm Jamie Lynn Sigler, a mom, actor, and advocate. I know how overwhelming it can be trying to decide which treatment is right for you. I've been there. But you should know you're not alone. You can do this. Start with some research, talk to the community, and most importantly, don't be afraid to ask your doctor questions. You might find results that speak for themselves. That's how I landed on Kesimpta. Ask your doctor if Kesimpta, ofatumumab, could be right for you. You can check out the details at kesimpta.com.
The Quarter Pounder with Cheese had many great things. Maple-flavored griddle cakes isn't one of them. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Police in Clarkstown, New York have discovered that just before she was murdered, 27-year-old Michelle Despinas pushed the record button on her answering machine and captured the entire confrontation with her killer.
The police listened to the tape that was on the answering machine.
Her voice breaking in terror. You can hear her begin to struggle.
But who was the attacker? To detectives' surprise, they're clued in by Michelle herself.
In her own voice, Michelle is yelling for Ken to stop. Ken, stop.
Ken, stop it!
She wanted to capture whatever happened between them on tape.
Then the investigators hear the thud of something falling.
We believe Michelle went to the ground, either by being struck or by fainting.
That's followed by a loud bang that sounds like a gun went off.
We hear the fatal shot, and the tape goes dead.
For the detectives, the recording is a game changer.
There is no more compelling evidence than the words of the victim herself naming her own murderer.
She sent the homicide detectives the evidence they needed from beyond the grave.
Now, they hope the tape can be used to leverage a confession.
On the day of Michelle's funeral, Ken attended the funeral, and police asked Ken to go back to the station with them to talk about the case.
Detectives have a tape player ready in the interview room.
Why am I here?
Because there's something we want you to listen to.
The police played the tape for Ken. This was the first time Ken had heard it, and he was quite shocked.
Do you recognize that voice?
Ken thinks he's free and clear and suddenly hears the voice of Michelle herself yelling out his name.
At that point, his demeanor changes.
He's horrified, he's upset, but yet he stands by his innocence.
I don't know why she said my name. Because you were there. It wasn't me.
Ken has no explanation for detectives.
He just leaves.
Ken stands up and walks out. The detectives decide to let him go.
The tape alone isn't enough for them to make an arrest.
You have Michelle's words, but what you don't have is a murder weapon, and you still have an alibi.
A friend who owned this video store admitted that Ken was hanging out at the store at the time the murder was committed.
Despite his friend's claim, could Ken still be involved in the murder somehow? Police decide to subpoena his phone records to search for any suspicious calls.
What we noticed was that there were several calls to an individual who lived in Ken's neighborhood in the week prior to the murder.
The police then get in contact with the person that Ken was phoning.
The man says he doesn't know anything about a murder, but he does admit something alarming.
Ken had been speaking to him about purchasing a gun.
He admits that on September 15th, he sold Ken a pistol.
The gun was a 9mm, which was the same type of weapon that was used to kill Michelle.
Just hours before the shooting, Ken bought a handgun consistent with the shell casing that was found at the crime scene.
It's another piece of compelling evidence, but there's still a major roadblock in the investigation.
There's one sticking point left in this case, that video store alibi.
Making an arrest depends on dismantling the alibi. So detectives bring in Ken's friend, Alex Green, to see if he'll stick by his original story.
I don't understand why y'all want to talk to me again.
We've received some new information.
Detectives reveal they have a tape that strongly suggests Ken wasn't at the video store like he claims. And Alex quickly changes his tune.
Ken's friend now admits that none of that was true.
The owner of the video store had lied, and the reason why he lied was he claimed that he had been visited by a member of Ken's family.
He said that the cops would want to talk to me, and I better say Ken was with me that night.
And what if you didn't?
He said, or else.
He was afraid for his life.
So what are you saying now? That you weren't with Ken?
Well, he did come into the store.
He actually did show up to the video store at 7 p.m., like he originally said.
But he left shortly after 8 and didn't come back till 10.
The alibi that Ken provided to police was false.
Stay tuned as we navigate through the unpredictable twists and turns of this gripping episode.
Police in Clarkstown, New York are building a case against Ken Rogers for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Michelle Despinas. But so far, Ken has had a rock-solid alibi standing in their way.
from about 7 to 10 p.m., he was talking with a friend at a video store.
But in their follow-up interview with that friend, Alex Green, Ken's alibi is starting to crumble.
According to Ken's friend, Ken left the store about 8:20 p.m. and he didn't return to the store till after 10 p.m.
That opens the window wide for Ken to be able to get to Michelle's house, commit the crime, and get back.
After their interview with Alex Green, detectives are ready to make an arrest, and Ken Rogers can feel it coming.
After hearing the tape, he called and left a message for Michelle's mother and sister, and he said, "I'm sorry, guys, goodbye." Ken then tried to take his life that night by swallowing Drano.
He ended up having to go to the emergency room to get treated.
Unlike Michelle, Ken makes a full recovery.
Ken made an agreement with investigators that he would turn himself into police right after being released from the hospital.
But that's not what happens. Back home the next day, Ken attempts to make a run for it when officers come to arrest him.
Rather than cooperate, he decided to flee.
Ken was trying to jump out a back window to get away. Fortunately, one of the officers was around back.
Ken was arrested and went to the Rockland County Jail.
With Ken now secured, detectives let Michelle's loved ones know that they have her killer in custody.
I thought that I would be so excited and so happy. It was just more grief. I'm glad they got him, but it kind of solidifies this really happened.
It was a sense of relief to say, wow, he's off the street, so what do we do to get him behind bars and stay there?
The police get some help from one of Ken's fellow inmates at the jail.
While he was in the jail, a person overheard some conversation where Ken admitted that he shot Michelle. Some of the details were details that only the killer would know.
The jailhouse confession is the final piece of the case the police have been building. And in May of 2000, Ken Rogers goes on trial at the Rockland County Courthouse.
The trial focused primarily on the tape. But in addition to the tape, there was an abundance of evidence pointing towards Ken's guilt. First, he had a motive to kill Michelle Despinasse.
According to the prosecution, Michelle was murdered because she'd broken up with Ken.
Since the breakup, Ken had been stalking her and trying to force her to take him back.
But Michelle refused to be intimidated.
He saw his harassing behavior was not working.
Ken found out that she was dating another man, that she would never take him back.
And he refused to accept it.
We are over.
We'll see about that.
Ken was extremely jealous when he found out that Michelle had moved on.
If he wasn't going to have her, nobody was going to have her.
Prosecutors claim the murder was premeditated.
Ken planned out exactly what he was going to do.
Then he put his plan into action.
On the day of the murder, he bought a 9mm handgun.
He goes to the video store to start establishing an alibi.
Next, Ken drove to the home Michelle shared with her mother and sister.
When Michelle spotted him, that's when she called her friend.
But Michelle didn't initially realize it was Ken outside.
There's someone out there. I could see him.
Until he began banging on her front door.
Kid, you can't keep doing this.
Why can't I keep... Unaware of the violence that he had planned against her, Michelle let Ken inside the house.
She was still willing to let him come into her house and talk to him, hoping that he would leave her alone.
But Ken had something else in mind.
He confronted her about the fact that she was seeing other men.
An argument ensued. I don't like the fact that you're dating someone else. I still want to get together with you. Things got very heated.
How many times do I have to tell you?
Tell me what?
It's over, Ken.
It's not over.
That's when Michelle pressed record on the answering machine. And what happened next was caught on tape.
The argument quickly escalated and it turned into a physical struggle.
He knocks her to the floor, stands over her.
Michelle was on the floor begging for her life while this man stood over her and shot her in the head.
The coroner determined the shot was fired within 1 to 3 inches of Michelle's head.
Ken fled immediately after the shooting.
He headed right back to the video shop to establish his alibi.
Ken also covered his tracks by disposing of the murder weapon.
Sometime after leaving the house, he got rid of the gun.
The weapon is never recovered, but even without a literal smoking gun, the jury is convinced.
After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury finds Ken Rogers guilty. If it wasn't for Michelle's quick thinking, he might have got away with this.
It amazes me that Michelle had the presence of mind to press the memo button on her answering machine to record what was happening.
But regardless of the verdict, Ken doesn't back down.
At the sentencing, after he was convicted, Ken was given an opportunity to speak to the court. He came up with a conspiracy-laden theory about him not being involved.
He still maintains his innocence even at this point, but I think he's the only one he is fooling in this case.
Michelle's family is outraged.
Things got very emotional, and Angie Despanas got very upset, and there were some words exchanged between them.
For him to say, you know what, I'm going to play the role of God and take your life because you're not with me. I think it's demonic. It's evil.
Like the family, the judge is in no mood for Ken's lies.
Judge Nelson admonished him for putting the family through that again.
The judge was not a fan of his.
The judge sentences Ken to 25 years to life.
He would be eligible for parole in August of 2024.
Michelle's family and friends have mixed feelings about the outcome of the trial.
You have that sense of relief, but then there's a possibility that after serving a certain amount of time that he can come out. I've never come to terms with that.
He shouldn't be allowed out. I felt like he should have gotten life. She was loved by many. We all lost her.
Michelle was a vibrant member of the community. She worked within a maternity ward, bringing life into this world, and her life was taken from her.
How many people would she have helped? So much she could have accomplished. Ken took that away not only from her, but he took Michelle away from the rest of the world.
Michelle always went above and beyond to make sure that others were okay, even if she had to miss out on something. That's what this world is missing without Michelle.
With Michelle Despanas' quick thinking and the power of modern technology, detectives were able to solve the case with her assistance even beyond the grave. Though Michelle's life ended tragically, she was a beloved woman who dedicated herself to helping others in the medical field as a nursing student and uplifting those around her on and off the basketball court. Michelle Despanas, cherished by many, will forever inspire and live on in the hearts of her loved ones. Coming up on the next episode of the Fatal Attraction Podcast.
They were a small-town couple living a quiet life.
Her family was everything. She was really just happy.
They started discussing marriage.
It was a match made in heaven.
But their future would be cut hellishly short.
Please hurry. The trailer is on fire and his fiance is inside.
He was able to go inside and get her out.
But is he too late to save her?
He tells the dispatcher, I don't think she's breathing.
It was said to be a perfect match, a fun-loving couple whose chemistry was undeniable. But beneath the surface of their southern charm, Was there a deeper truth buried in a tangled web of deception? What really unfolded that morning in the quaint town of Hooks, Texas? Tune in to the next episode of the Fatal Attraction Podcast. We will see you in the next episode.
You don't wake up dreaming of McDonald's fries. You wake up dreaming of McDonald's hash browns. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.